Let's talk some NASCAR. It's been a long season, an arduous season, although it doesn't seem that long ago, or doesn't seem like it was that long ago that we were talking our Daytona 500 predictions. But here we are, final race of the season at Phoenix. The championship four are set and ready to go, and we're going to preview it here, B. Scott and I. And what a last couple of weeks we've had. In the NASCAR world, especially this past week at Martinsville. We'll break down the race, but before we get going here, I did want to say I don't know if it's just because it's been around for so long and we're just used to it now, and that's what's warmed me up to it. But for NASCAR, because I don't think I would ever want to see IndyCar do this, but for NASCAR, I think I'm starting to warm up to the playoff for it. I'm
oh yeah. And IndyCar could never do it anyways, just because IndyCar doesn't have a long enough season.
Right.
So I mean, NASCAR from February through the beginning of November. I mean, that's a long season. So they're able to do it, but I love it because it adds another layer of strategy. I mean, from what we saw today, it all that matters is getting to that championship four. I mean, Ross Chastain, whoo, buddy. Hey, I don't need this car anymore. So we're going for it. It doesn't matter. It's for us. It's championship four or nothing. So good for. I mean, that you wouldn't see a move like that normally, because if it was the old point standings and everything, a guy like Ross Chastain would probably be like, yeah, I don't have. I'm mathematically eliminated from the championship at this point. But having four drivers that can compete for a championship, and you're that close to being, you normally wouldn't have seen a move like you saw from him today. Just driving that thing balls to the wall, into the wall, scraping the wall around the turn so he can keep as much momentum as possible, and passing a handful of cars, including Denny Hamlin, to bump himself into the championship four and bump Denny Hamlin out. In the old standings, you would not have seen that. It probably right now would be down to Chase Elliott and Joey Logano. And Christopher Bell would not be sitting in the position he's in either right now if it wasn't for this playoff format. So you got to love the playoff format. Hey, I even like the stage racing as well. I've come around to that. And honestly, I think stage racing might be kind of fun in IndyCar, to be honest. I really do enjoy that.
For sure. So let's go ahead and recap this Martinsville race real quick. It starts off with Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott leading the field to the green flag. On lap 121, Denny Hamlin passes Chase Elliott for the lead. It looked like a good race for Denny Hamlin early on. Championship contenders, we start to see them get lapped around the lap 200 mark as Chase Briscoe and William Byron both go a lap down. Chase Briscoe at lap 215, William Byron at lap 217. Lap 273, Ross Chastain and Brad Keselowski make contact while running in the top 10. Keselowski crashes. Lap 31, Chase Briscoe gets the free pass and goes back on the lead lap after a yellow, so that comes into play later. During the round of pit stops, Christopher Bell does take the lead. 30 laps to go. Chase Briscoe stays out as the leaders pit under caution, so Chase Briscoe looks like he's going to put himself in a position to get into the final four. But with 4 laps to go, Christopher Bell takes the lead from Chase Briscoe. And then Christopher Bell ends up coming in and getting the win. Ross Chastain, like you mentioned, an insane move where he looks like the video looks like it's not real because of the fact that you have him speeding around the turn juxtaposed against all the drivers in turn 3 and 4 going really slow because that hairpin style of the track.
So it is. It was a video game move.
Yeah, it looked surreal. He gets in, so that sets up the final four of Joey Logano, Chase Elliott, Christopher Bell, and Ross Chastain, and not necessarily in that order. I think it's a different order, but it's going to be fun. It's going to be really fun. I mean, you've got this championship. I think, for one, this championship 4 is maybe the most wide open than maybe we've seen it in years past. I know, like going into, I think it was last year. I mean, yes, you still had like Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, Martin Truex Jr., and them all battling it out. But Kyle Larson was on such a run and had, basically was just the runaway favorite that he ended up just taking care of business, and that didn't surprise you. I wouldn't be surprised if any of these 4 drivers took home the championship when it's all said and done on Sunday. I would not be surprised if any of those drivers won it, because each of them have put together that kind of season and have had that kind of run on the year. And I mean, the storylines are just insane. I mean, you look at what this title would mean to every driver. I mean, for some, they're adding to their already solid legacy. You look at Joey Logano. Of the 30, he's one of 30 NASCAR drivers all time with 30-plus wins. Logano is one of 15 drivers with 30-plus wins and 1 or fewer titles. A championship would put Logano amongst the 14 drivers with 30-plus wins and 2 or more titles, and he would join names like Terry Labonte, Ned Jarrett, and Kyle Busch with a pair of championship titles. Chase Elliott, his father raced for 36 years. Only won 1 title back in 1988. If Chase Elliott were to win, it would be his second title in 8 seasons. Like 8 total seasons he's run. He obviously would be his second title in 3 years, I think. But he's in his total amount of time he's spent in NASCAR, it's been 8 seasons. He will already have 2 titles, which is nuts to think about. And then, like you said, you have 2 drivers who are, going for their first championship. I mean, it would be insane for Ross Chastain to win for Trackhouse Racing. I mean, it was last season was the first season that Trackhouse Racing was in existence, which is crazy to think about. I mean, you've got the other drivers that are from Penske, Hendrick, the names that we're used to. And then you have Trackhouse Racing, who, with their kind of ragtag team of Ross Chastain and Daniel Suarez, have really, kind of taken NASCAR by storm this year. And Ross Chastain has a chance to bring home a title. And then you've got Chase Briscoe.
It's not Chase Briscoe.
Sorry,
Christopher Bell.
Yeah, I deleted the wrong name on my sheet.
Yeah, it's Christopher Bell.
But Christopher Bell, I think his best points finish is like 13th. And that's what I was going to say about that, is that like you have a couple of drivers that not only are going for their first championship, but are all also like they've never been even close to this position. Like not even like, oh, they were close last year and it didn't pan out. Like, no, this is literally the closest they've ever been to a title. How will that affect them as they go into the race? So, I mean, the storylines are just, aplenty for this final race of the season.
Oh yeah, I mean, for Joey Logano, it you're right. It would submit him as one of the better all-time drivers. Personality-wise, I don't think he makes the list quite as well, but statistically, it would be there for him. Chase Elliott, I think it would solidify his first championship and prove to everyone that he is going to be a legitimate contender year in and year out, and that Rick Hendrick has made the right decision in making Chase Elliott one of his premier drivers and keeping having him be one of those drivers moving forward. And then you look at Ross Chastain and Christopher Bell. Both of these guys have extremely bright futures. I mean, for Ross Chastain to be making his first championship 4 appearance with a team that is brand new. Like Ross Chastain said, it was just a few years ago, he was racing in the Southern 400 and he had a podcast as his primary sponsor, and their goal was to finish single-digit laps down. That was their goal for the day. They were just excited to be out there running, and now here he is just a few years later. Actually, may even just be 2 years later. Now he's in the championship 4 with a young team. I mean, remember, Ross Chastain was a guy that had the opportunity last year with Chip Ganassi Racing when Kurt Busch had some injury issues and couldn't race. So he has that experience of working with a high caliber team, and he's carried that experience over to his time now at Trackhouse and has put that into getting them into the championship 4. And look, I don't, winning a championship for either of these two guys would mean the world to them, obviously. But they're young, they have bright futures ahead of them, and they have nothing to hang their heads about if they don't win that championship. I think the pressure to win the championship is higher on Chase Elliott and Joey Logano than it is on Christopher Bell and Ross Chastain. Ross Chastain and Christopher Bell are excited to be there. They've proven they belong there, and they know how to get back there. So this is part of their learning curve. Whereas Joey Logano and Chase Elliott are expected to be there and expected to bring a championship home. So yeah, Joey Logano or Chase Elliott could potentially hang their heads and go, man, so close yet again, but yet so far away. Whereas Ross Chastain and Christopher Bell can go out there and just kind of race. They can just run their race, be stress free about it. I mean, yeah, there's going to be some butterflies and some stress to it because these guys are wanting to be champions. Obviously, that's everybody's goal. But I don't think the pressure is there as much for them as it is on Joey Logano and Chase Elliott. So that would be an interesting dynamic to watch. Can those guys race loose? Not like car loose, but like, breathe loose. And can Joey Logano and Chase Elliott, can they overcome that stress factor? That, can they just go out there and run their race as well? That will be a really key thing. I think if, Ross Chastain and Christopher Bell can have just a good race and be up there running and contending for it, everybody's going to be like, that was great for them. That was awesome. Heck, even if they don't, everybody's going to be like, that was a great season from those guys. They have bright futures. We're excited for them. Whereas, Joey Logano and Chase Elliott being expected to be there, there's going to be a little bit more pressure.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Because, I mean, especially because, like you said, these are the names, Logano and Elliott are the names we're used to seeing up there, and these are two guys, like we mentioned before, have never even been kind of this close to doing it. So it's going to be an exciting race to watch. So we're going to do a version of hot or cold here, where we're going to rank the 4 drivers from hottest to coldest, who we think is most likely to win the championship. So no takes on this one. We're just going to go from top to bottom, who we think is the most likely to win the championship. So as far as it goes for me, I've got Logano as fire for me. Phoenix is a good track for him. His last win came there pretty recently in 2020. He's been narrowly more consistent than Chase Elliott through these playoffs. So he's put together a little bit more, of a consistent playoff. I mean, I know it all comes down to this one race, but he's still been, I think, a little bit more consistent. I put a slightly more faith in him. Chase Elliott is hot for me. That's a sentence I never thought I would say out loud. Honestly, he may be the least consistent of these 4 through the postseason as far as, where he's finished in the races. I mean, he's got 2 races where he finished outside the top 30, which isn't great for Chase Elliott. But I think because he's got the equipment around him, because of who he is, because of who he drives for, I think you just have to put him at second behind Joey Logano. You have your 2 favorites. They were probably always going to be 1-2 as far as who's going to be more likely to win. But even though Elliott probably deserves to be 4 on the list, just because of the equipment and who he drives for, I think just bumps him back up to 2. Christopher Bell is cold, ironically enough, because he's been probably the hottest driver of the postseason. He's got 5 top 5s in the playoffs, 2 wins, which is the most among drivers in the postseason. So not just of the drivers in the
which
Final
is surprising.
4. Yeah.
Typically in the playoffs, don't we normally see, 1 or 2 non-playoff drivers win races? But it seems like this year it has been like non-playoff drivers almost consistently winning. So it's really interesting.
Right. And then Ross Chastain for me is freezing. As strong as Bell he's been as strong as Bell, just minus the wins. But he's also clearly, as we saw at Martinsville, he's the most aggressive of the 4, which I think is a good thing, but also can be a bad thing. I mean, we see those exciting, players in all different types of sports. And, with all the amazing highlight reel things that happen, it also comes with the things, that aren't always so great. I remember, always talking with our friend Chris Simmons about Javi Baez. If you're going to love Javi Baez for stealing home in the NLCS, you also got to love him when he gets thrown out by a mile at second base. Like, there's going to be some wild things that happen. And so while I think, Ross Chastain is definitely a wild card, but I think of those four, I think he's the least likely to win the championship.
Which, folks, write it down now. Ross Chastain is winning the championship.
Exactly. We got to reintroduce the Crash Kiss of Death to the people that haven't heard about it yet.
Exactly. So I'm going to do the same thing that you did here. I like the fire, the hot, the cold, and the freezing. For me, Chase Elliott is fire. Going into Phoenix, he has run really well there the past couple years. Obviously, he's won a championship there. He contended right up to the very end with Kyle Larson for the championship there last year. I feel like he has that experience. He knows how to run that track well, and I think it's going to be a lot of all hands on deck trying to get the car correct. I mean, Hendrick Motorsports loves winning championships. So now that they only have one car in the final four, it's okay. Let's figure out what needs to be done to get this car to be the best it can be. And obviously, they have some of the best minds in NASCAR as well. Joey Logano for me is hot. This one is kind of tough. I wanted to actually, you know what? I'm going Christopher Bell as hot. Like you said, he's one of the hotter drivers in the playoffs right now. He knew he needed to win to get into this round, and he went out at Martinsville, which is honestly one of the more underrated hard tracks on the circuit. If you think about it, it's a long race. It's grueling. It's those tight hairpin turns, and it's short track, but not quite short track. It's really hard to get your head wrapped around. So he went out at a very tough track and got the job done. He did what he needed to do. So I think he carries that momentum on into Phoenix. And so I have him as hot. I do have Joey Logano as cold. Yeah, he did win a race this round. And he does run pretty well at Phoenix typically as well. But I don't know. I feel like he became complacent. Can he flip that switch? After he won that first race, he kind of became complacent in this past round. Is he able to flip that switch back on? And, if somebody races him hard, that's not in the championship for, is that going to be something that gets under his skin and lets that creep into his mind? Because one thing we do know about Joey Elliott is he is a little bit of a hothead at times and does not like people racing him very hard, which it's silly if you ask me. So I'm putting him as cold here just because there's some intangibles there that that have kept Joey Logano from being a champion in the past, and I think could keep him again. I do have Ross Chastain as freezing. I don't want to, mostly because the dude. I guess I'll have to give him props for what he did. What he did at Martinsville. He said, "Nope, I'm gonna get in. If this works, I'm in. If this doesn't, I'm not in. If I don't try it, I'm not in regardless. So let's just do it." And just rammed that thing into the wall and went full throttle around the outside of the track, and it worked. So
isn't it wild?
Yeah,
that in in as many years as racing has been around, we've never seen that. No one's ever been like, you know what I need to, obviously it's because
everybody is like, I gotta keep right. I have to take care of my equipment. And it was the last turn that he did.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many people have been in a situation where they could pull it off, where that one driver I need to get to is right there. He's so close. I just don't think most people think about it because they're probably thinking, man, if I hit this wall and I break everything, it's over. He was just like, who cares? I at this point, I'm out. If I don't try it, I'm out. If I break it, but if it works and I'm in, great. I don't think you're going to see it all the time because I'm sure Trackhouse Racing was like, look, we're young. We may have needed some of those parts. You just, ooh, that's not a good shape anymore, man. And I think that's a thought that goes through a lot of drivers' heads and why they don't do it. But hey, props to him. So yeah, he's freezing because it took a bold, like insane move to get him into the championship four. But I'll tell you what, by him getting in, you're right. It does make this championship four just wide open. And like I can come home happy if if three of the four drivers come home as champion. If you put thrown Denny Hamlin in there, I may have put Denny Hamlin up there at the top as fire. You know, it's just for some reason those type. Well, I don't know. He's also a premier choker as well
Yeah.
when it comes to pressure moments.
Yeah, I was gonna say if he had ended up being if he was in this conversation for the championship, I was gonna pose the question or at least bring it up, like, is he like the most decorated driver without a championship? I mean, 3 Daytonas, 500 wins. He's not won at Indy, so that would be like kind of one of the other last notches. But he's won the Coke 600. He's won 3 Daytona 500s. He's in the top 17 in wins all time. He needs 2 more races to get to 50 wins. So like, and then he'd be like top 20 all time in wins, and yet he does not have a title, which is pretty nuts to think about.
Yeah,
I think
I mean, like Mark Martin, does he have a title?
he's got more wins than Mark Martin, and I don't think Mark Martin has a Daytona 500 win either.
No, and then
So,
like Dale Earnhardt
Dale
Jr.
Earnhardt Jr. No, because he does. I mean, he's won the Daytona 500, but he doesn't have the wins, doesn't have all the other
So
accolades.
yeah, he would be the Dan Marino of NASCAR.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think
essentially.
is it Junior Johnson that's like also up there in wins, but without a title. But I mean, I think at least in recent memory, he's the most decorated driver without a title.
Yeah, I think so. Wow, that's surprising.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's definitely going to be anyone's race going into this final race here at Phoenix. So time for our predictions. Let's predict who is going to take home the title in 2022. We're going to give a bold prediction and a champion. For me, my bold prediction is Ross Chastain, winning the championship. Like I said, he is a wild card. Just the story alone, like even if you took everything else out of the equation, even if you said, you know what, even if you took the fact that he, is willing to make moves like he did on Sunday at Martinsville, like, out of the equation, like still the fact that you have a driver that's never been on this stage before, driving for a team that is kind of, amongst, the outlier, like, the fact that, this is an opportunity where it's going to either be some weird footnote that we in 5 years from now look back on and are like, remember when Trackhouse Racing made the Final Four a couple years ago? That was weird. Or it's the start of something really, truly amazing. So
I think it's that one.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, what they've been able to do, because like I remember, like to me, like watching the Daytona 500 a couple of years ago, like Ross Chastain and Daniel Suarez were just filler on the scoring pylon on the graphic that NBC or Fox would have, and now they're legitimate title contenders, which is insane. And so that story alone, and then you added the aggressiveness, just the instinct and IQ that we may not have seen before, as far as just being able to be like, thinking outside the box. Hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to floor it and use my car as like I don't know what you call those, like when they're on a.
He turned Martinsville into a Hot Wheels racetrack.
Right, exactly. Like to be able to do that is just insane. So so the story, the fact that he's just so aggressive and so just insane with what he chooses to do on the racetrack, I think that would be just a really amazing story if he were to get the win. My championship pick, however, I couldn't decide between Joey Logano and Chase Elliott, and I didn't really feel good making either of those two picks, so I'm going with neither of them. I'm going with Christopher Bell. He, we see it in the NFL, we see it in the NBA, we see it in all sorts of sports. Heck, we see it in the World Series with the Phillies. Sometimes it's the team that gets hot at the right time, and that's what Christopher Bell has been. He's gotten hot at the right time. He's driving, the last 9 weeks have been possibly the best 9 weeks that he's had of the season. If you take any 9-race segment out of the year, this is possibly one of the best runs he's had. He's battled through some adversity, getting caught up in Kyle Larson and Bubba Wallace's mess a couple of weeks ago, and he still has, even with that, has been one of the hotter drivers of the postseason. So my pick to win the title is Christopher Bell.
So my bold prediction is actually Christopher Bell. He's been hot. I know it could be an easy champion pick to begin with. I do like that pick, but it's really I'm just gonna stick with him because I think going up against the likes of Logano and Elliott at a place where they know how to get it done is going to be tough for a first timer in this situation. Can he do it? Oh yeah, absolutely, he can do it. I don't think it's all that bold of a pick, to be honest. I think like your pick of Ross Chastain is a bold one, but my actual champion is the number 9.
It would be
Chase Elliott.
It would be the biggest upset ever if you picked anyone other than the person on your shirt.
I know it would be, but look, just something has been off about him this year. I can't quite figure it out, but I feel like he figures it out. He comes together and just puts together a good, solid race at a track that he knows he's won at before. This is another year in the championship for him, and he knows how to contend at this track. I think he goes out, he gets it done. Do I necessarily think he wins the race? I don't know, because like I said, this playoffs, we've seen more non-playoff drivers win than we have actual playoff drivers. So I'm going with Chase Elliott to bring home the championship. He was the regular season champion. I think he finally finds that groove again in this last race, brings it home, and sweeps the year and brings home the ultimate playoff champion as well.